Hey guys, welcome to Cinematographs. I've never fully been into serious action movies because I just end up losing interest a lot, but one action film that I've always respected is Mad Max Fury Road. So naturally, I was extremely excited to see Furiosa. And I'd like to preface this by saying I've only ever seen Fury Road, so I'm not a diehard Mad Max fan, but I am a diehard Fury Road fan. With that being said, I think there's a pretty widespread sentiment that Furiosa is not meant to overshadow Fury Road in any way, but rather add on to everything that's been established there. So because of that, you can't really compare them against each other. But in no way does that mean the films are two completely separate entities. In fact, Furiosa sometimes feels like they are making deliberate references to what we know Furiosa and Fury Road. They very much connect and work together. But Furiosa feels very fresh, not stepping on any toes while opening a lot of doors for what exists in the story. After seeing this in theaters, I rewatched Fury Road and I can confirm that while it's all in the super cool, explosive George Miller Mad Max style, the tones of the films are very much different and not what I was expecting. And I don't mean just in the plot, but in the rhythm of the films. Furiosa is split up into different chapters, and I wasn't fully aware of this when going into the theaters, but about half of the film follows Furiosa in her childhood, and the first chapter is very energetic and contains some of my favorite moments in the film, but then the second chapter kind of launches into a quote-unquote normal story, and it's like that fast-pacing resets. It was jarring for me, especially because I thought it would be like Fury Road where it was just constantly moving, but that wasn't the case, and I lost some of my attention early on. And so chapter 2 was very much my least favorite part of the film, as necessary as it is to the actual plot. After that, this sort of reset happens again, but for the most part the film continues to build momentum from there and it becomes less of a problem. The issue with rhythm also appears in some of the action sequences. I feel like some moments dragged on a second too long, or the cuts felt slower than they needed to be, but it's something that I barely thought about. What I noticed more was how a lot of the sequences didn't feel as grand as Fury Road because there were a relatively small number of people involved in the fighting. And it's probably because Chris Hemsworth's character, Demented, is the villain of the story, but never really poses as a big threat against Immortan Joe, and that power imbalance is seen pretty early on when they encounter each other. So that's probably why a lot of the times it's just Furiosa and one of two people against Demented and his crew. She's always fighting semi-alone because I'd imagine that if it were full force against full force, Gastown wouldn't stand a chance. That disappointed me a little bit because one of the things that always keeps me invested in action is the teamwork involved, which is what had drawn me to Fury Road in the first place. But disregarding that, Hemsworth plays his role well. Maybe. It depends on what the movie was going for. If they wanted Demented to be a big, intimidating figure who actually has quite a heart and is a bit clumsy to a fault, then Hemsworth had that down to a T. However, if they actually did want him to seem like a great adversary to Immortan Joe, that didn't really come across. But that would be a large flaw that I don't think Miller would let slide, so Hemsworth's portrayal probably was what Demented was meant to be. That also may be why Furiosa is so enraged, because her mother had to die to the cruelty coming from a man like that. And speaking of Furiosa, Anya Taylor-Joy kills it as her. I honestly think she was a great pick for the role. She manages to capture that anger and need for revenge that Furiosa has, along with a sense of elegance. It's so easy to root for her and be in awe of each and every one of her moves. Every time she got a hold of a sniper, I was mentally cheering. And I had a good feeling that Anya would get a lot of praise for her performance, but I feel like Alila Brown, who plays young Furiosa, deserves some props for her role as well. She genuinely only has like 4 lines, so a lot of her acting had to rely on her expressions, and I think she did that beautifully. It's very easy to look at all 3 Furiosas that we've seen across these movies and connect them as the same person, while knowing the differences between them and why those differences exist. There's a tad bit of romance between Furiosa and this one guy, which I thought was a little bit random, but it might have just been like a why not bit to throw into the story, and it definitely gives Furiosa even more of a motive to seek vengeance. He's also there for my favorite fight scene of the film, which is when Furiosa is in the middle of the wasteland and gets a very big reveal, so I can't really complain. The teamwork that I was talking about being missing from the film is present in their relationship and their action scenes, but I just wish it was on a bigger scale between more people. And I always love Miller's visual style, but particularly how he utilizes the natural elements in his images. The dust storms, the wind blowing, the fire. not to mention the use of sound and the absence of it. It all creates this dynamic range in the film that pulls you in and heightens the tension. Though I mentioned inconsistencies with the pacing before, in the really big scenes I do feel as if there are high stakes keeping me on the edge of my seat. And at the same time, there were moments that were funny and light and made some random guy in the theater with me cackle. That sort of thing is how you know you've had a good watching experience. My overall rating is an 8 out of 10. I don't find Furiosa to be an instant action classic like Fury Road was for me, but I do think it's instantly one of the best films to come out of 2024 so far, and it especially blows all of the other actions I've seen this year out of the water for obvious reasons. Along with that, I do think it belongs as a Mad Max film, despite Max not actually being in it, which I'd heard some concern about initially. Both the beginning and the end chapters of the film were two great ways to start and close Furiosa's backstory properly, and it's clear that with Furiosa, George Miller is sending a message that Mad Max is about more than Max himself. It's about this entire world he's created and all of the little details that make it up.